Hey, this is Koch from Intro to Computing. We're going to be looking at some rotoscoping today. Some basic information about rotoscoping to begin with. It's a technique used by animators where you take live action footage and then you use that as a reference to make your animations from. This might be a kind of a good example to look at where they have a side-by-side comparison of this Alice in Wonderland live action scenes that they filmed, and then the animators take that information and then they will build their piece off of it. The typical kind of technique is to layer a transparent film over the top and then you kind of trace over it, but whenever you have your character design, you import whatever is happening with your character design in there. So obviously you can use your artistic license to make some changes. One of the things I want to work on today is making a really simple kind of line drawing rotoscope, and I can show you an example of some students that have done that in the past. For instance, here's one where this is something that a student would do just during class. So each of these might be 30 to 50 frames or so. Some are shorter than others, but basically you're just trying to get sort of the basic movement of it. You can see that there's some kind of shaky lines on there. That can be kind of a nice quality whenever you're just fast, like trying to work fast and tracing these things. But if you want to be slower, take your time, you can use a pen tool and even filled in with colors and do a pretty good job with it. Today we're just going to do something really kind of nice and simple. We're just going to do some line drawings, but in order to get there, we need to have some sort of thing to work off of. So I was going to use this scene from The Princess Bride. Just because it's kind of a nice fight scene, I think it would translate well as a rotoscope, just because the movement seems really fluid, the silhouettes are good. So first of all, in order to make this, I'm going to need an animated GIF so I can import it into Adobe Animate. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this link here and I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to use this website called Giphy. This is where you can make a really simple animated GIF. The only stipulation really is your video that you're using has to be under 15 minutes. So this one is well under that, so it's fine. So I'm going to Giphy and I'm going to paste my link in here. And then it takes you to this part where I get to choose my start time and then my duration. My start time, I think I'm going to do it where it's like on these stairs here. I want to do this part. I might even just kind of extend this some, just so I have some room to work with in case I don't want to do that entire part. Okay, so it's about 14 seconds long. I'm going to go to continue to decorate. That's going to take me to this next page. This is where you can put on your glitter graphics, I guess, but we don't necessarily want to do that. So I'm just going to go click on continue to upload. And sometimes like this might not show up on your screen. You just have to like scroll down, or you have to hit a X button or something. I know that sometimes it makes you want to something with cookies, but now I'm going to click on upload to Giphy. And let's give this a minute. Okay, so next thing I want to do is save this animated GIF on my computer. So the way to do that is by right-clicking on it and then going to Save Image As. Once I have that, I'm going to just call this Princess Bride. and then click Save. Now I've downloaded it. Next part is opening up Adobe Animate. So this is the screen that appears right whenever you open up Adobe Animate. I'm going to just use this default 1920 by 1080 right now, just because it's a vector drawing that we're going to be doing, and it doesn't really matter what size we do it at. So we can always make it bigger or smaller later. But for now, this is fine. I'm going to click on Create. Okay, so we have our blank stage right here. The first thing that we want to do is import our animated GIF that we just made. So I'm going to go to File, Import, and then Import to Stage. And then I'm going to click on my Princess Bride GIF. Right now it's loading. I'm not sure how many frames long it'll be, but it should be kind of long. Okay, so here it is. It's showing up pretty small on the screen because I'm at 1080 by 1920. I'm just going to zoom in and kind of work my drawing on top of it. Not really sure where I want to start from. I guess there's good. Okay, so I've got my animation going on. I'm going to zoom in. I'm just zooming in by hitting Control Plus. There's other ways to do it, but or I could go up here in the upper right of the screen, 200%. Now, I'm going to title this my background GIF, so I can do that just by double clicking on this layer 1. Okay, now I'm going to make a new layer, and this is going to be the layer that I'm going to be drawing on. And I'm going to double click on that part, and I'm going to call this my Rotoscope layer. Now here's an important part. Whenever I'm drawing on this, I'm going to only be drawing on this layer, and I don't want to affect the layer below it, so I'm going to hit that lock part here. As long as that's locked, I can't affect anything on that layer. And again, this is pretty long. It's about 400 something frames. I have on my first layer here, see how it has this kind of end frame. I'm going to hold down the Control button, and whenever you see that double-sided arrow, you can use Control or Command. And whenever you click on that, you see the double-sided arrow. I'm going to click and hold this and just move it over. Where if I'm looking at our animation here, that bottom GIF that we have, it is for every 2 frames of animation, or every 2 frames, it changes. So there's 2 frames and then it changes, 2 frames and then it changes. So what we're going to do is make a drawing, and then we're going to duplicate that frame basically. So we're going to just do 1 drawing for every 2 frames, and that does make sense. We'll kind of go over it. I'm going to remove these first 2 frames of my GIF though, because see how nothing happens there? I'm just going to get rid of that. I'm going to highlight a couple of these frames by holding the Shift button, and I'm going to right click and hit remove. I'm going to unlock that first, now I'm going to hit remove. Okay, now I'm locking it again. Okay, now here's the important part. I can start drawing directly on here. There's a blank keyframe. We're going to be making blank keyframes all throughout this piece. So we're ready to actually start drawing on it. I'm going to use my paintbrush to do my tracing. Right now, my color, it's set on white. It's where your fill color is. I'm going to change my color to something that we can see pretty well, so I'm going to make it this kind of bright teal. And now I'm just going to start my first part of my rotoscope. So I'm going to just get a basic kind of tracing here. Now this, I could be as detailed as I want with it. If you're doing a more kind of special piece, where it's like an actual animation where you're kind of making a movie, you might get specific with it where you have like their clothes kind of knocked out, but for now this is just sort of a practice thing. What I want to do now is duplicate this. I want to add a frame to this because I want to make this 2 frames long. So my keyframe here, I'm going to highlight it, right click, and then insert a frame. So now I've added that extra little spot there, and it's making that 2 frames long. And you can see all these frames that have the black dot on it, that means it's a keyframe. If I didn't explain it earlier, a keyframe is just whenever something changes or something's new that happens within the animation. So whenever we're looking at our GIF down here, that next part is showing the change that happens in the next frame. So we need to make our new keyframe here. If you right click in that blank spot above that, you have a couple options. There's insert keyframe and insert blank keyframe. We want to insert a blank keyframe, so we just have a base that kind of drawn. And once I have that base keyframe in, I can start drawing on top again. So here's his hair. And I'm going to try to get through this as quick as I can, just because it can be a little tedious and might not be the most interesting thing in the world to watch someone draw on top of this. But it should at least kind of give you the idea of the workflow. Oh, that foot. That's alright. We'll keep going. Okay, there's that sword. I'm almost done with this other part. Okay, so I think the second one is done. Now I'm going to right click on that and then insert a frame. And what I can do now is just kind of going to look at what these two look like side by side. I'm using this red slider here to kind of go back in between, just kind of check and see how the animation is going. Okay, I'm going to go to my third frame here. I'm going to right click and insert a blank keyframe and then have at it. Again, I'm going to try to move through here quickly. Now if this is something where you were doing a rotoscope of a video that you took of your own, or you're kind of using that to make your own animation piece, that's where you could just use that as a reference. Then you can kind of take your own character's details and stick them in there, just using your kind of artistic license. I'm going to wait for this auto recovery part to finish. Okay, finally. Okay, get back into it. I guess I'll have to edit that part out. One thing you may notice is my brush size. I've kept this kind of small. You can change your brush size in your properties menu over here. I don't know if you can see it, but here's where you control your brush size. I just have it on 1 since it's so small. Okay, now I have this frame done. I'm going to right click on this and then insert a frame. And now I'm ready to go to my next keyframe. So I'm going to right click, insert a blank keyframe. Now I'm going to draw this part. I might do just a few more so then we have enough animation to kind of see what's happening. I don't know if I drew his hair last time. Okay, I did. Not even really sure where the swords are now. I think they're kind of foreshortened. I can barely see him. Okay. Oops. Knock out these legs. Okay, there's my next frame of animation. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to right click on this, add a frame, or insert a frame, right click, insert a blank keyframe. It's a pretty monotonous process once you get used to it. Right now our animation is set at 24 frames per second. So to put that in perspective, for every frame that we're working on here, I need 24 of them to equal 1 second of animation. So that's pretty wild whenever you think about it. Right now we've made 4 drawings, but that's 8 frames total. So we're about 0.3 seconds along. Now, whenever you think about a full feature animated movie, you might be able to kind of appreciate the work that goes into those. That's why it takes years. Luckily, with digital animation, things have gotten a little bit easier on the artists, just because you can kind of copy things, you can work through other stuff quickly, you can generate animation. One nice thing about a program like this is there's tweens that you can do. That's just short for in-betweens. And that's whenever you're kind of filling in the frames in between each keyframe that you do. So it kind of does some of the work for you. Gosh, I can't even see this guy's sword. I'm just kind of guessing a little bit there. Right click and insert a frame. So I have this so far. I'm going to hide my background animated GIF just to kind of see what I have. And I can do that by clicking on the eyeball here. And so far that's kind of the few frames that I have. I could spend longer and get the rest of these, but in order to keep this a somewhat short video, I think I'm going to just take these and then show you how to export it. So one thing to mention, whenever I have my animated GIF imported into my Animate file like this is 400 something frames long. You have to think each one of these images is about 2 megabytes, so the size of this file is about 800 megabytes. This can get pretty big for some people's computers if you don't have a lot of space. So what I'm going to do, just to save myself some space, obviously I'll save this, but I want to transfer my frames over to a new piece. So what I'm going to do is click on this first frame on that layer that I was working on. I'm going to click on the last frame while holding Shift. And while holding Shift and clicking on the first and last frames, it should highlight all these in blue. I'm going to right click on this and hit Copy Frames. And now I'm going to open up a new Animate file. I'm just going to make it the same thing, hit Create. And now in this first frame of the timeline, I'm going to right click and paste frames. Now as I zoom out, you can see we're filling in that little space there. I can use my red slider just kind of see how the animation is going. And I want to make these bigger, and then I also want to make them black so I can see it better. So what I'm going to do is something a little tricky where I'm going to be editing multiple frames. I'm going to click on this Edit Multiple Frames button on my timeline. And once I do that, you can see this new thing appear where my red slider usually is. These two things are your anchors. You can adjust your anchors in a way that will make it a little bit easier to use and edit multiple frames by clicking on this button right next to the Edit Multiple Frames. And what I want you to do is click on the Anchor Markers area. Now once I anchor that, it means I can move these where I want them, and then it won't move around whenever I'm kind of clicking on these frames. Now in order to edit multiple frames, I need to choose the frames I want to edit. Since I want to edit them all, I'm going to click on this first frame, I'm going to hold Shift, and click on this last frame, and it'll highlight them all in blue. First thing I'm going to do is change the color. I can change the color of all these at once right now just by clicking on my Fill button there, and then picking this black. Now while I still have all these selected, I'm going to go to my free transform tool in my toolbar. I'm going to click on that. Once I have that, it's going to have a bounding box around this. I'm going to hold down the Shift button and grab one of the corners. I'm going to click and drag it. And then I'm going to place this on here so I can kind of fit them on the screen. Now the good thing about edit multiple frames, it shows like where every single frame you have is on here. So it's all happening at once. So, I might kind of bring this in a little bit too. So I'm going to turn off my edit multiple frames for now, and I'm in my properties area. I can change the scale of my stage here, that white space, just by editing this part. So it's at 1920 right now. I want to see what this looks like at 1500. I'm going to try 1400 now. Okay, so that's a little bit, it's kind of bringing it in a little bit more. It's still kind of awkward on that edge. So I'm going to edit multiple frames again, and I'm going to adjust those. So I'm going to click on this first one, hold shift, click on that last one. So I'm going to highlight these, and I'm going to move it over so it's just in frame a little better. I'm going to unclick edit multiple frames, and now I have my little animation here. I'm going to go up to File and export this as an animated GIF. This is kind of the main way that you export. I'm going to click on this. Actually, this is kind of a good part because you see this checkerboard background. It reminds me that I'm going to hit cancel. I want to make a background for this so then it's not transparent. So what I want to do is make a new layer by clicking this in my timeline. I'm going to click and drag this below my rotoscope layer, and I just want to make this a white background. So I'm going to click on my white color in my fill area. I'm going to make a rectangle and just put this behind it. Okay. Now I'm going to go to export and export animated GIF. Now here you'll still see that it's a checkerboard. This is in the optimized version. The way that we want to do this is in original. Original, you'll see it kind of has our white background. It is much better for the quality of your work. It'll have more kind of detail to it. But I just want to go through a few of these things. Right now, all this stuff on the right is fine. Colors, you always want to have the most amount of colors with it. There's diffusion and dithering, that's all good. Right now, this is an area where you can change the size of it. 1400 by 1080 is still pretty big. I might reduce this by 50%. So this is where I can click on 50, and then that'll change it accordingly. It won't change my actual file, but it'll just change how I'm exporting it. Other point to go over is this looping area where it says forever. I just want to make sure that forever is checked, because that's important. And everything else looks fine, so I'm going to click save. And then I'm going to call this Princess Bride Roto. I'm going to click save, and then I have my Princess Bride Rotoscope piece. I'm going to open it up. So that's what we have so far. That's just, 4 or 5 frames of animation right there. It's not even half a second long, but give yourself some time and do up to 100, 200 frames, and it'll become something kind of significant. Anyway, hopefully this gives you sort of a start on rotoscoping. It is sort of a time-consuming thing, so take your time making them look nice, and as always, let me know if you need any help. Alright, goodbye.